welcome back to What Would You Ask podcast. My next guest, I have to say, and I hope this doesn't run the, how many have we done? 130 in the last 6 months. One of my favorite guests, I have to tell you right off the bat. And for those of you who think are my favorite, you are. I mean, you are. And for the rest of the 99% that don't care what my opinion is as far as their being favorite or not, that's fine too. I'm just impressed with her. I mean, how could you not be impressed with somebody that's been on Shark Tank? It's not been on, achieved that. That's an achievement to get onto Shark Tank. It's a very small percentage of people get on. And then comes back, and we're going to talk about today is her time on Survivor. And then on top of it, she owns a car wash. No, she's an anesthesiologist. She's a doctor. I mean, we have very similar backgrounds. Not at all. Not one bit. She competed on Survivor South Pacific, season 23. And she's got a little story behind that, too. I want her to share it with you as far as Mark Burnett goes and where she was going. Was it Shark Tank? Was it Survivor? And let's listen to what she has to say about that. Fun fact is what we're going to call this was that she did appear on both episodes, and she's an anesthesiologist, as I said. Edna Ma, welcome to What Would You Ask podcast. Welcome back, I should say, to What Would You Ask podcast.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me back.
I'm glad excited. You're here. Tell us a little bit about the story about you wanting to be on Shark Tank, wanting to be on Survivor. You love them both. Mm-hmm. Take it from there.
So I think this is now 2010, and right now we're recording this episode the beginning of autumn of 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's been a few years since I was originally thinking of this. I had launched a startup company called Bare Ease. It's a product that numbs the skin before waxing or laser, so it doesn't have to hurt to wax the bikini area. And I was kind of inspired by that because as an anesthesiologist, my whole MO is to try to minimize pain, treat pain, prevent pain. That's just my MO. And so, sorry if you hear that airplane.
That's all right.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let me just close the window then. I'm in Los Angeles. I live very close to the Santa Monica airport, so that's why we have these little tiny planes that fly over. Okay, I'm sorry for them. Just trying to get some air, but okay, there. Okay, so back in 2010, I had just started my business that is called Bare Ease. It numbs the skin in the same way it numbs the skin before starting an IV on a child, before surgery, or in the IV in the operating room or in the emergency department. And I said, why can't we just take that know-how of numbing skin and apply it to the bikini area? So I started this company, and about 2-3 years into it, it was just getting kind of overwhelming, doing my anesthesia job, taking call at the hospital, labor and delivery call, general ER call, and it was just a lot to run the business and work full-time at the hospital. So at the time I said, I think I'm ready for Shark Tank. And I just put it out there. I said, does anybody know anything about casting for the show? And I didn't hear anything until my friend, a co-resident of mine, he was in Arizona at the time, Mick Trimming, who had filmed in Survivor Samoa season 19. He had messaged me or posted on my Facebook response, I think they're casting for Survivor, but I don't know anything about Shark Tank. So I said, I'm going to go. I know it's the same production company. I didn't know it's like different casting and different network. I didn't know any of this. Okay. I didn't know anything about Ponderosa. I didn't know anything about Survivor. I didn't know, I saw season 1 of Survivor, and that was it. I mean, that was like when the contestants would come back off the island and they would go to the late night talk shows like Jay Leno. Every night they would have like somebody who got casted off. That was when it was still a big deal. And I saw that first season. I didn't see any other seasons really, except maybe mixed season. So I show up and I just tell them that I'm here for the Survivor casting. And I just felt like if I can get further enough up the casting food pyramid, then I can get to the right people, and then they'll just move me from one line to the other line, like a little lateral movement. And that's kind of what my plan was, but didn't work out that way. And I think that they really liked my story. So anyway, we went on Tuesday. By Thursday, I was casted. And I said, no, you don't understand. I really want to be on Survivor. Not on Survivor. I don't want to be on Survivor. I'm here for Shark Tank. And they thought it was a little bit ballsy of me to just say, basically lie my way into it. People are literally, I think Cowboy Rick on my season, he had applied 17 times. And he talked about that nonstop, about how every year he submitted his casting video until he got casted. And they said, well, I think this can be if you want to, Mark Burnett pulls me aside. He's like, I think if you want to raise money for your business, you can win money. You have 1 in 18 chance of winning $1 million if you say yes. And so like literally 2 weeks later, in the spring of 2011, I was on a plane to Samoa.
That's amazing. That is a great story. So let's get into some of our member questions. First one is from Bill from Boston. He wants to know, Edna, is there any way to prepare for Survivor? Good question, Bill.
I think it is a very good question. And I would recommend you watch every season and you kind of identify yourself with which person you are. Okay, like which cast member or castaway you are, and then see what strategies that worked for them and didn't work for them, and study it like an exam. Okay, if you've taken the SATs, you go find those previously published tests and you go through the answers and you find out which answer was wrong, you find out which answer was right, and you just do them and you watch each episode and you find out which contestant, okay, this person made a mistake because they were too, I don't want to say bossy, maybe had too much, were too opinionated. I find that is very detrimental, and you just kind of see what works. Generally laying under flying low under the radar is a pretty good strategy. Avoiding like wandering off into the forest and looking for the immunity idol by yourself, generally a good strategy to avoid. So there are some basic overriding themes that is a good idea to kind of follow. And you can just, there's certain recurring patterns that will help get you further into the game.
Yeah, Stephanie Kendrick, we had a conversation on here on the show, and she mentioned an interesting one, I thought, and we'll get your feedback on this. She said she let other people do her requests. Like she would go to someone and talk about, we need to, go and talk to whatever. And that person is the one that goes and talks to that person. And she said the reason is she wanted to stay neutral. But she wanted information. So she used other people to kind of ask tough questions to other people. You know what I'm saying?
So she was sort of like the intermediary, or like a sort of a therapist in like
kind of
psychology.
But it was interesting. She said, because I didn't want the blowback from the people going, wait, why is Nick asking about this? I don't trust him. You know what I mean? She's over here and she's asking the other people to ask the questions. I thought it was that's a very smart strategy, because you're not in the line of fire at that point. But she said you have to keep those people really close, and it's, you have to be kind of in alliance with them. And then you say, it's just not me to do that. And you can handle it better than I, and you pump them up and let them go. And then all of a sudden they're off the island. Anyway.
And so to Rob's question?
It was Bill from Boston.
Bill from Boston.
Yeah.
So Bill said, but from like kind of an earlier, before you're kind of on the show, I would say study what's already out there. And when you're on the show, that Kendra advice is amazing. It's good strategy for real life too, actually.
Yeah, it really is. That's true. Is there anything that they need to do, Edna, as far as diet, as far as physical or emotional? I mean, is there anything, because it is a common theme with Survivor and a lot of these shows like this, that, I mean, think about it, folks. You're out in, Samoa, and you're on an island for 30 something days or whatever. Hopefully you're there for that long. And there's no joke about this, folks. I've done a ton of interviews. I've talked to a lot of producers. This is no joke. There is no bathrooms. There's no toilet paper. There's no food that they give you, when the cameras are off. It's not like, if you guys do this, we'll give you a Snickers bar. It's not happening.
You're absolutely right.
What can they do? That's got to be an amazing toll on your body, your emotional being, your physical being. Tell us a little bit. Is there anything they can do to prepare for that?
Okay, so there's multiple approaches I would recommend. One is sort of like from a physicality, maybe you can start building muscle mass, because that is energy storage. So you're just preparing physically, and also you're storing this energy storage, because it's not like you can just store some extra granola bars in your or protein bars in your pack, because when you're getting dressed, they have somebody from your basically naked. You have to get dressed in front of your handler, so they make sure you're not smuggling anything in. So that's one aspect. But if your muscle mass is, and if you're bigger in muscle mass, that helps a lot. For all the female contestants, I would recommend that they get a like a progesterone shot, a birth control method, so you're not having your period on the show. That is very, something, nothing that you have to worry about. But for my personal situation, I think once you're on the island, you're just like all of a sudden with 9 other women, and then your periods are all synced up from the pheromones. And then everybody's then I just didn't have my period because I was far enough into the game, because you're just starving.
Got it. Makes sense.
Anyway, that's a practical TMI for you.
Absolutely. No question about it. Beth from Huntington Beach, California wants to know, tell us your impressions of Jeff Probst. Wow.
So I think there's 2 Jeffs that you see. One Jeff is the TV Jeff. He's very good. He's a professional. He knows his work. And if you talk to any of his assistants or the other co-producers, he's such a professional. He has his earpiece that you can't see, that the producers are giving him information about what's next. So footage and film is not wasted, but he never uses it according to his assistants. And so that guy he's a professional actor. So I remember one of the earlier tribal councils, and I was still kind of really buttoned up at that time. And I was afraid of saying anything controversial. I'm just afraid of just everything, because Corinne Kaplan is somebody I know. And Corinne Kaplan said, after I did Survivor, I was unemployed for 2 years because some of the stuff I said, they took it out of context, they sliced and diced it. And then if you look up my name, and now it's just like Corinne Kaplan is some terrible adjective. And so she said, you be careful what you say. So I'm like sitting there in my little suit, and I'm just afraid to say anything. And Jeff Probst says to me during tribal council, like, don't fuck with me, Edna. This is a $10 million production. And I was like, my jaw was down here, and I'm like, oh my God, Jeff just said the F word, and now he's yelling at me. And I'm just like, I almost fell out of my wooden stool. So then there's that Jeff. And then there's the Jeff who's like the nice guy. Like a year later, after I was on the show, I saw him, I was sitting in a parking lot. I'm like, that's Jeff Probst walking across the parking lot. So I'm like, run out of my car. I'm like, hey, Jeff, it's Edna. And I'm like, I would just start talking to him, and he was the nicest guy. He was just like buying lunch, and he was the nicest guy. So I think he has to maintain he has to get a rise out of you at tribal council. So he's just doing that, don't mess with me, professional work. And then, he's the nice guy when he has to turn it off. And his staff love him. His staff absolutely love him.
He's also, he's the boss. I mean, there's Barnett and there's other people behind the scenes, but he is the boss of that show. He's not just the host of that show.
He's the face and everything that is in it, because honestly, I don't think he can get any other job besides that anymore. Yeah. Like he did have a talk show, the Jeff Probst show, for a little bit, but it didn't last for more than one season, because you felt like you're being interrogated by Jeff Probst at tribal council. So I feel like, maybe his guests were like, I don't want this interrogation.
Aaron from Madison, Wisconsin asks, what would surprise us to know about Survivor? When you first go out there, and she put this in parentheses, and it's a little bit of a paragraph, so I read it quickly. But she's basically asking, when you first go out there, are the camps different than we see them through TV? Or is it the challenges? Are they different? Tell us, a little bit about what surprised you.
There's a huge production aspect of it. So when you first arrive, we were in Samoa, Western Samoa, which was devastated a few years prior to our arrival by an earthquake.
Right. Yep.
And so the infrastructure was not very good. And I suspect this is probably similar to a lot of other places, but maybe like more the developed places like Fiji, maybe they have like luxury hotels and stuff like that. So we were in an actual camp. Like everybody got their own camp, a little Kelty tent. It's for 1 or 2 people set up for that. And then you lived in that tent with like fancy outhouse situation for the first week prior to production. They do all the the opening sequence recording. You do your interviews with like Entertainment Weekly. That's almost 3 to 4 days. And so you're kind of acclimated to the time zone change. You go through wardrobe several times. And so that opening sequence that has your name, it says your Chiron with that Survivor font, and you're kind of rowing in, have serious face, smiling face. And they do that little montage that's usually filmed that first week. Then once you're in the game, like the area you're your campgrounds for the actual while you're playing in the game, it's pretty restricted amount of space. It's not like you have free range of the island, or you can just like, I'm going to go over. This is what I thought as a TV audience. Like, why don't they just go to tribal council? Obviously they have a fire. They have a thatched roof. Why don't they go there to sleep? Well, you don't know where that place is, because what they do is between the challenges and between tribal council, they take you in a blacked out van. Are you aware of this? Have you heard this before?
I'm not as detailed as you're giving it to me.
Okay. I don't know if I'm supposed to be telling this. Oh, okay. So anyway, you go in this like a 12-seater van, extended minivan type thing, and the windows are all blacked out, and then you cannot see the driver. So you're riding around these unpaved roads. It's super nauseating. I remember later on, Dawn Meehan said the roads were so bad, she actually threw up in her mouth. There was no place to throw it up. She swallowed it back. So that was how serious, like they actually pulled over for me to try to dry heave, but I couldn't. And since then, I don't think I've ever really gotten nauseated. But so you don't really know where you're going. It's not like you can just appear at tribal council, the empty structure, and sleep there at night, but the campsites are not that big. Then they do a little bit of work. The production team does a little bit of work, like the shelter material, that long old bamboo, the mature rounded bamboo. Those are clearly, like, it's very clear this is not indigenous to that particular area of the forest. And why is it so uniform to the other campsites on every single season? So they must procure them somehow, and they scatter them about so it looks sort of like authentic, that you're scavenging for materials. And I for our particular campsite, I do think it was previously used in season Samoa, because there was some fabric it looked like it was from a previous tribal council flag or something, that looked like it had some survivor logo that was like left by accident, like trash. So I think that they did use that site, and it was a very idyllic site because there was a flat area really close to the ocean, very very photogenic, very scenic.
Nice. Christina from Pittsburgh, PA wants to know, what was the best part of your experience on the island and the worst part of your experience on the island?
I think that's a good question.
Christina.
That's a good question, because now I have the experience of looking back on it. I would say the best part of the show was just having done it. And you, at the end of the show, you feel like, okay, I have done it. I'm capable of doing this now. And I think what you were asking earlier about how you prepare, any of these other shows like Naked and Afraid, I mean, all these kind of similar kind of, I think, experience and emotions you kind of go through. You feel like, okay, I did it. You were able to accomplish this huge feat physically, mentally. It takes a toll on you. That was probably the best part. The worst part is sometimes when you actually live through it, you just feel like it's sort of indefinite. You feel like, okay, you just feel like a little bit of a refugee living. You're like, okay, 39 days just seems like such a far, far time away. You can't even conceive of that, because you can't even conceive of the next 2 days. How are you going to make it through the next 2 days? For me, it was a little bit traumatic because I really wasn't I think I was casted as an early vote off because of how soon I was casted. Like 2 weeks before we went. And then after I got voted off of Redemption Island, or after I lost on Redemption Island, went to medical. Jeff Probst came to the little medical tent. And this is where the doctor's kind of weighing you, giving you a bag of food, and just kind of making sure you're not going to die. And he says to me, "Good job. You did a really good job." And this is goes back to the Jeff that is like the person Jeff, not the actor Jeff. And the doctor who was examining me said, he's never done that. He's like, I've been on the show since the beginning. I've never seen him say that to a contestant. So I feel like I was intended for an early cast off, but that didn't happen. So I feel like that goes back to having been able to do the show. But going through it during the day-to-day rigorous process, when you have somebody like or maybe in my situation, Brandon Hance, trying to get me off the island. And at that time, I had the highest number of votes against a female contestant in the history of Survivor. Wow. So that means I got far enough into the game where people were writing my name down every time. But so I didn't have 5 votes and off I go, but I kept having. So I think exactly lots of votes against me. So that's totally demoralizing.